right, hello, future TED Talkers. Very exciting. Are you having a great day? Yeah. Sounds like it. I was popping in and out of rooms. I love to talk about students as problem finders, innovators, and entrepreneurs. I write books about it, and I actually design schools. I was very excited to hear the last speaker talk about what if you had schools where, well, my book is called Students Taking Charge. What if we had schools where students take charge of their own learning? In the schools that I design, students actually work all day on solving real-world problems. And so that's kind of a little bit about what I do for a living. Now, I thought about coming here today, and this is a very exciting group as I look out in my audience. I will say, if any of you are tweeters, that's my handle, so please feel free to tweet away and include me in it. But as I think about speaking with you guys, it occurred to me that you have grown up with apps. How many of you love apps? How many of you used an app today? Absolutely. I love apps. Now, here's the thing. Oh, okay, this is good. You guys are alert. This is going to work. Okay, so absolutely you use apps, and you used some today, I noticed. And, you know, I'm a little bit older than you. I don't know if it appears that way or not. But when I was born, this was the telephone. And the mobile part of it was that cord, how far you could walk with it to get into another room so someone couldn't hear your conversation. And when I was 12, my dad bought our first mobile phone. It filled a suitcase. Now, when I came of age to be able to get my own mobile phone, which was 18 back in those days, it was actually a sack that I would carry around. That's crazy, isn't it? Thank you. Gentleman said I'm old. So, but I'm young at heart. So, when I think about the world today, I am grateful for the kinds of phones and tablets we have now that give me apps. And I love apps. I use apps. I use apps to find restaurants that I want to go to have groceries delivered to my home, to check on the weather, to manage my fantasy football team, which I might add is in the playoffs this weekend. I use apps to track how many steps I take and to track how well I'm doing on my weight loss program, which I might add is not doing as well as my fantasy football team. But I love apps. Except I have an idea for another app, an app I want to create that actually wouldn't be housed on a computer, and it's called Pi, and not the kind of pie you eat. So I need your help because it requires your brains. Now, you have some great brains. Your brain has two sides. It has a side that is very analytical, can organize. It has a side that's very creative, artistic. And when you put it together, now students, as you grow, and you go through middle school and high school, and I'm not talking to the adults right now, just the students. As you go through middle school and high school, your brains go through a process of pruning and strengthening, and you guys actually have the best brains out there. Better than your parents. So, this is why I need all of you to help me with my app, because you are my Pi app, my problem finders, my innovators, and my entrepreneurs. How many of you are doing that today? All right. So, let's take a look at what this is all about. How many of you have heard of Project Loon? You heard of Project Loon, where we're actually looking at how we give everyone internet access. Now, you know, we all have internet access and we take it for granted, but there are a lot of parts of the world that don't. So imagine these balloons that are flying way up high, higher than the airplanes. As a matter of fact, they fly in what's called the stratosphere. How many of you remember learning about the stratosphere in school? Oh, this is good, okay. I've got a good Pi app out there because you guys are actually paying attention in school, because you need this information if you're going to be a problem finder, innovator, and entrepreneur. So the idea here is that these balloons fly carrying devices that provide internet access to people all over the world. Is that way cool? So now we've already determined I'm a little bit older than you. Thank you very much. So I might use some terms that seem a little outdated, but since you're my Pi app, you know, you guys like me, right? 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 Okay, so when I say, isn't that way cool, you're gonna call out, way cool. You got that? So the thought of floating balloons through the stratosphere to give us Wi-Fi everywhere, is that way cool? Way cool. All right. But this is a problem that's already been found and solved. So let's look at a problem that hasn't been solved yet. Colonizing Mars. We know that there's water on Mars, and we know that there's possibility of a similarity of our atmospheres. And there's actually a space race going on among countries. But there are companies that are now selling rocket ship tickets for a one-way ticket to Mars. You will go and you will colonize Mars. How many of my Pi-appers out here would buy and take a one-way trip to Mars? I love you guys, you see? That's why you're my Pi app, because you are going to improve my and your world. I love that. Okay, now think back, put on your thinking caps. Where else in our history have you heard about a group of crazy people who got on some vehicle and went to some place to just start it up from nothing? How about the Pilgrims? Oh, how many of you learned about the Pilgrims and the Mayflower in school? All right, good, paying attention. Think about this. A group of people got on a boat, came over here, and created, due to their risk-taking and ingenuity and innovativeness, created what we have today as the United States. Is that way cool? All right, so we have to colonize Mars, and you might be one to do that, but let's stay out in outer space. So when rockets leave the atmosphere, when they launch off of Earth, they use a tremendous amount of rocket fuel to get outside of our atmosphere. Once they're out there, they don't need as much fuel to fly around. The problem is they've used it all. So people are now looking at, is there a way for us to create rocket fuel out in space so their rocket could maybe fly to the moon, land, refuel, and then travel into deep space for exploration? It turns out that rocket fuel is made of hydrogen and oxygen. What else do you know is made of hydrogen and oxygen? Water. Boy, your teachers must be proud of you guys. But you know where else you can find hydrogen and oxygen? In asteroids. In asteroids. So there is a company called Planetary Resources that is actually working to mine hydrogen and oxygen out of asteroids to create rocket fuel out in outer space. Is that way cool? Let's come back to Earth. We take water for granted. Turn on the tap, the water comes out. Go down to the store, buy a bottle of bottled water. But 1 out of 7 people don't have clean water. In my schools, we have students who are actually looking into how to create better irrigation systems and how to filter water better, et cetera. I believe that my Pi app out here could actually solve the global water crisis. How many of you think you could contribute to that? You've got the brains, remember? You've got the good brains. How many of you have heard of the Prosthetic Kids Hand Challenge? Right, you can actually go online, download directions, and using a 3D printer, print a prosthetic hand for a child who needs one. Is that way cool? And I think that you could even make it better. So you're my Pi app. You're going to go out and change the world. That's what I'm counting on. Let's look at a couple of problem finders, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Now, it turns out that this is a problem. You hear about nuclear energy, nuclear power plants, et cetera. What they do is they create nuclear waste. Nuclear waste is very dangerous. and we don't know what to do with it. So what do we do with it? We put it in these silos, and we hope that it doesn't leak. Now I'm thinking one of the solutions could be we could ship it to Mars, if we go back a couple of slides, right? But then that would create a galactic problem. So we don't want to do that. Well, it turns out that these two problem finders, who are students at MIT at the time, determined that that was a problem they wanted to solve. They created the plan for a reactor that would take salt water, mix it with nuclear waste, and come up with enough electricity to power the world for 72 years. Is that way cool? So these guys are not only problem finders, but they came up with a solution that makes them innovators, and they took it a step further. They started a company called Transatomic Power, and they are entrepreneurs. Now, you don't have to start your own company to be an entrepreneur. The word entrepreneur simply means take your ideas and put them into action. And the fact that you're part of a TED Ed club means that you're learning how to take your ideas and then speak on them, advocate for them, put them into action, which is what you want to do. Because you are the problem finders, innovators, and entrepreneurs who are going to change the world. Now, as my Pi app, you need to use a design process. How many of you have used a design process or are familiar with it? All right, I have my own that I created under my company IDE, and I want to walk through another very interesting problem that was solved. It turns out that in India, 120 billion pieces of cutlery are being thrown out a year. Plastic knives, forks. That's going to be a problem. And this man, Narayana, decided that's a problem we need to solve. So step one is you need to formulate your problem. Like, what is the problem? Why is it happening? And my favorite question, what would happen if we didn't solve this problem? Because when you encounter problems, you have to consider what would happen if you didn't take action and try to solve it. So the next step after you decide on that is to explore it. Do a lot of learning, figure out what you need to figure out about the particular topic, and then move on and ideate. Come up with every possible idea. And that's exactly what he did. And then he sifted through those ideas until he came up with the one that he felt would work. He was actually able to create cutlery from grain, from millet, barley, wheat, and he would be able, because it is made from millets and rice, forget the barley, millets and rice and wheat, that it would be compostable. It would just go right back into the earth. So the next thing he had to do was simulate it, prototype it. I like to say simulate is when you give your ideas wings. So what he did is he tested it out, made his recipes, tried it out, figured out what would work, what wouldn't work. And it turns out that with his spoons, for example, you can eat your lunch, and then you can eat your spoon. Is that way cool? Now, if you don't want to eat the spoon, you can simply toss it aside, because in 3 days, it will go back into the ground and be decomposed, and it won't have any negative effect on Earth. Now, that is pretty cool. And what he did is he then took it to this step, the final step, which is to advocate for your ideas. And he started as an entrepreneur a company called Bakey's Edible Cutlery. And he took it even a step further with that because he made it flavored. So you can get the garlic spoon if you're eating your chicken soup, and you can get the cinnamon spoon for your tea. Or your ice cream, of course, yes. Again, I forgot your age. So it is so important that my Pi apps all use a design process as you are thinking about what are the problems you want to solve. Because what you're doing today is so important. You're actually exploring, and as part of a TED Ed club, you're thinking about what are the problems out there that you want to solve. Every time you look now, I hope when you leave today and you look at the world around you, you will start identifying problems that you could solve. And then you will start coming up with ideas and innovating them. And then you will create your TED Talk so that you can advocate for that idea. Is that a promise? All right. You know my Twitter handle. Go out and change the world. Bye, guys.